Hey everyone, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to Relevant Jukebox, and today we're going to talk about the newest album from Mount Eerie, Lost Wisdom Part 2. So this is the newest collaborative album from singer-songwriter Phil Elverum and musician Julie Doiron. So Phil Elverum is somewhat of a legend in the lo-fi experimental singer-songwriter world, with not only his work under the Mount Eerie name, but also with his band The Microphones, which if you are unfamiliar with The Microphones, I'd highly suggest going back and listening to records like The Glow Part 2, or It Was Hot, We Stayed in the Water. There's some of the more eclectic and interesting lo-fi experimental rock records that have come out in my opinion. And when Phil's working under the Mount Eerie subname, it's usually a little more stripped back and naked comparative to those Microphones records. And the overall listening experience you get from a Mount Eerie record is one of the most personal and intimate that I've come across ever, especially recently. And I think this is mainly because of the sound of Phil's voice with his almost borderline spoken word delivery at times, but also like the gentleness of the instrumentation in the background and a lot of the melodies that he writes adds to this warm experience. In recent years, his records have gotten even more personal, dark, and sad, which is mainly due to the sudden loss of his wife, musician Genevieve Castro, to pancreatic cancer in 2016. Now, that event in Phil's life resulted in one of the most tragic records I've heard ever, A Crow Looked at Me, which saw Phil reliving in graphic detail his experiences through that event and his dealings with grief with his daughter. I mean, it's one of those records that you kind of have to hear to believe, and it's almost something that I don't feel really comfortable suggesting to people, but it's still a pretty beautiful piece of art. Now, this new album here isn't exactly as much of a harrowing listen, but it is still dealing a lot with loss. Phil touches upon the loss of his wife again with him and his daughter, but also more recently his divorce to actress Michelle Williams. And this record is actually a direct sequel to Lost Wisdom Part 1 that was also a collaboration with Julie Doiron. And for the most part, on this record, the music feels like it takes a little bit more of a back seat, and the stories that Phil is talking about are more in the forefront again. The track Love Without Possession stuck out to me quite a bit. It might be one of my favorite Mount Eerie songs ever. It's this beautiful duet by Phil and Julie where he's kind of recounting his divorce and reinterpreting the meaning of what love is to him now moving forward with him and his daughter. The song overall is pretty quiet with a lot of these gentle guitar chords swaying in the background, and the last minute and a half of this track picks up in just the best way possible with this accordion that's added in and very minimal drumming. And at the end of this track, the way that the guitars just bleed into the mix is just something unbelievable, I think. It's extremely minimal but really impactful. It makes for one of the more beautiful moments in music in 2019 for me. I also dug the track Windows. It's the only track on this album where the instrumentation builds up into almost like a wall of sound with a ton of cymbals and guitars, and it does sound almost like a textbook Microphones cut. So I mean, if you've been following Phil Elverum's work up until this point, I do think you're gonna enjoy this record. Phil's music has always been more on the somber side of things, but you can still feel that more darker shift in tone in the mood on this record since A Crow Looked at Me, and there's a lot of personal and poetic lyrics that are still reliving a lot of these experiences in his life recently in pretty vivid detail. I mean, if you're into this type of stuff, it's one of those things that you're probably going to either connect with or not. And for the most part, these tracks do feel like very brief kind of sketches and capturing moments of Phil's recent experiences again. And yeah, overall, I do wish there was more material on this album, and it might not have as much of an emotional impact of A Crow Looked at Me, or maybe as grand in scope as one of his previous records like Dawn. But I did really enjoy this record again. Like I was saying before, if you're a fan of Phil Elverum, I think you're gonna dig it. And with that being said, I'm feeling an 8 over here on Lost Wisdom Part 2. I do suggest picking this record up on vinyl if you have the chance. There is a standard black issued LP that's on Phil Elverum's website. I'm going to leave a link down below for you guys to grab that if you're interested. And yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this new Mount Eerie record in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to drop a like down below. And if you want more content from me, hit that subscribe button. Peace.